I am in Walcourt, in Belgium. I've been visiting companies to understand really their role in the ecosystem of photonics. And today I'm at a company called Estel. They are a transceiver manufacturer. I'm here with their CEO and founder, Philippe Bolle. Thank you very much for having me here. It was so far great to come here to Belgium on this morning. What is Estel?
Yeah, Estel is really at the beginning, if we talk the story behind Estel, okay, it's really the beginning to bring back sovereignty in Europe. Then this was the reason why we set up the company. It's purely for sovereignty. When after COVID and the war in Ukraine, Europe has been very hard pushing to bring back industrialization, as we have a so deep knowledge technology in Europe. You know, I have a team that I am working with since 25 years in Europe that are very clever to develop optical transceiver. And then we said, okay, what we have to do now is to bring back production. And sure, bringing back production is not easy, okay? But when you have the right partner, the right people, with the right ecosystem, it's feasible. And this is really why we decided to launch this venture, because today we are the first company in Europe designing and producing pluggable optics in Europe.
But why is it needed to have manufacturing in Europe of transceivers?
This one, we are a bit more on the, I would say, the legislation. As you know, Europe has been more and more critical in terms of people who are assembled in Asia due to cyber attack, cyber security. As you know, they have been putting some rule as soon as you are at level 3. And you know that last year there was this NIS2 law who are everywhere in Europe. And now they have been also launching this Cyber Resilience Act, where somewhere it's important because they ask you to control where you get the sourcing of your hardware, but also on your firmware. You have to know that inside the transceiver, you have a firmware where it's inside embarking in the pluggables. And today, all these firmware mainly are designed in Asia. Okay, when you inject this firmware in the transceivers, you cannot control what is inside the transceiver. That means the transceiver is not going to explode, okay? But if, for example, you said, I want 24 October 2025, my transceiver to stop, you can write it in the firmware, and the 24 October 2025, your transceiver will stop. If now you have your transceiver along a railway, or in an airport, or electrical plant, or nuclear plant, or a higher security application, you are in trouble. You have no more communication.
So it is clear that Europe needs manufacturing of transceivers in Europe.
Yes.
How do you define the supply chain, taking into account that many of the components that you need for building those transceivers are not yet made in Europe?
Yes, then what we have done on our side, as you know, 95% of the pluggable optics today are manufactured in Asia. Then it's very complex because major of the raw material is coming from Asia. That means for us, what we have done, we have to start somewhere. We cannot avoid it, okay? Then we are today supplying our raw material from Asia. But then we know where we have to go in the future. We know that in 5 years, we want to have an ecosystem in Europe. And in the meantime, you can switch from Asia to United States, because when you go on a higher bit rate for the hyperscaler, or I say the super data center, you use higher bit rate, 800 gig, 1.6, 3.2, and there it's still United States who is driving this technology. That means for us, for the future, we can switch from the supply chain in Asia to the supply chain in United States, and we hope that Europe will be able to fulfill our requirement in the next 5 years.
It is clear to me that the current climate is forcing Europe to have digital sovereignty.
Yes.
So while Europe should make sure that you are successful, that transceivers are manufactured here, they also have to make sure that your supply chain is successful, that you can actually source all the components that you need. But most important, because we're going to later see your facilities, that you can also upscale, that you can go to the millions of units that you have to manufacture in order to achieve that digital sovereignty. How has it been so far to interact with governments to make sure that you have the facilities that you need to go to this ultra high volume production?
I will say that I have to be honest, okay, Europe has a name called Europe, but then we have 27 countries, and then following the countries you go, you speak with, you get different feedback, okay? And it's clear that today, if you look at the telecom side, the number 1 investment country is Netherlands, the number 2 investment country is Spain, okay? And it's clear that following where you go, in which country you go, you get the support, and you have the people who understand what you want to do, because they have been already making steps to invest in the supply chain. Okay, if we speak about the wafer fab, if we speak about also the ecosystem in terms of research, people, innovation, it's very important, because the way we will differentiate from Asia is by bringing new technology with innovation that we can integrate in our pluggable modules.
Let's talk about your products. So you have a product already defined, which is at certain speed rate, and you have to upscale, and as you said, move also very fast in increasing the speed. What is your current product portfolio? Are you already selling devices?
We sell devices today at 100 gig, okay? We sure are approached by different programs in Europe for the higher bit rate. You have to keep in mind that US is always the first one, and then after normally you have a parallel Europe, United States. It's sure that the way that people deploy technology in different continents are different, but we target the European market today. That means that our goal is to come with a 800 gig transmission next year, okay? Then we expect to be sampling by Q2 next year, 800 gig transmission, and to have a full capacity production line in 2027 for high volume 800 gig, and automatically, as I said before, it's very important when you design your production line to be able to handle the next generation product, because the production line is so expensive. You cannot have multiple production lines. Then you have a production line, you can generate 1 million devices, and then you can do, I go 800, 1.6, 3.2. And then you produce.
So, but what makes your product different from the competition today? Is it just because it's made in Europe?
Sure that at the beginning, the made in Europe is important following the application. If you go to cybersecurity, if you go to space application, if you go on supercomputing application, the people prefer to have a product made in Europe compared to a product made in Asia. It's a clear message. It's sure if you go down the line in terms of the application, I'm not sure that the product made in Europe will make the difference. If you go to the access network, I don't think so that we can touch this market, because it's a commodity market, very high volume and low price. Okay, we have to keep in mind that we are in Europe. Meanwhile, we use a robot and everything. We have some legal obligation about a lot of different regulation that we have to fulfill. Then the production in Asia doesn't have to fulfill. Then we will always have a difference on the price, okay? And it's where we have really to be clever what we are looking for and to really target specific application.
But of course, you have made a production line which we're about to see, and you told me already that you have the best of the best when it comes to equipment. Why is it so important for you to own the firmware that you use?
Because the firmware is really what runs your transceivers. Do you know today the major issue on pluggable optics is power consumption? Okay, and then it's very key that how you design your transceiver, how you run your components in your transceiver is done by the firmware. Okay, that means if you want to optimize your module compared to other manufacturers, is really where you can position yourself is by your firmware. Okay, and it's the reason why we want to make our firmware by ourselves, and it's the reason why we have an R&D team here in Europe.
Of course, when it comes to making a pluggable module, it's all about the standards. We have standardized everything in pluggables. We have the aspect ratio, we have the connection, of course, we have the testing, the MSA. Those standards are normally driven by large companies. How do you deal with those standards, and do they fit actually your business today?
I will say that since we move on chip on board, okay, it's easier. Because before, I will say standard was very weak, okay? And since we have CMIS, now it's very common, because it's this communication protocol who is the same for all the bitrate on chip on board. That means, I will say, on this side, it's very convenient to have the same protocol of communication for all the bitrate. But really where you will make the difference is following, as I said, you are agnostic on the technology, but meanwhile, saying that we are agnostic, we have our preference, because some technology will have some advantage on the power consumption in terms of the size also. And then sure, as you said, we have MSA on the size, on the mechanical size. That means this one we cannot change. And also we have MSA on the power consumption, and this one we cannot change. And it's key for us to really optimize the right choice of the supply chain for the components, and also how we design our firmware.
As a transceiver module manufacturer who is at the edge of technology, you're of course talking to the photonic integrated circuit community. You said you're technology agnostic and you have your preference. There's indium phosphide for the lasers detectors and fast modulators. Thin field lithium niobate is coming. Silicon nitride community can heavily integrate many of the components that you need. How can they work with you? How can they provide the technology that you need to satisfy this upcoming demand from 800G, 1.6, and 3.2 tera?
I will say that following the application we go after, our customer have a requirement, specific requirement. That means that we will select the most appropriate technology following the requirement of our customer. But as I said, we are open to all the technology. Okay, the major issue today that we have, there are plenty of solutions in Europe. Okay, who are at the chip level. As I told you, we are pluggable manufacturers. Okay, we design pluggable. That means for me, it's impossible to get a chip. Okay, and then spending 6 months to package the chip to test it. I cannot, because as you know, today the bit rate is doubling every year. Then you can imagine if I have technology available in Europe and I need 6 months to package a chip to test, just to test. And after coming with the conclusion, yeah, it's the right one, it's not the right one, I'm too late for my product. Because when I develop a new component, I need 12 to 18 months, That means I would love if all these wafer fab or peak designers, they can come with something which is easy to manipulate and to test also.
Is it still the problem that it is a very fragmented supply chain, that when you need a product, you have to talk first to a design house, later to a chip manufacturer, later to a packaging center?
Yes, it's still the case. Yeah, it's very complex.
How can we solve it?
I think so. The best will be to have companies who take the full ownership, to go faster, time to market. Because today, I think so, we are still too sticky to TRL3 to TRL5, where in our case, we are in the industrialization. We have to go fast, okay? We cannot lose time. That means for us, it will be very nice if we can have companies in Europe who can integrate different, functionality, and not being a wafer fab, being a big designer, and then being a testing house, where you have to work with 3 companies to get a product.
Of course, the TSMC model is still there, but in Europe we don't have it, and that requires many companies working together. Is that a matter of money? Can we do it just by getting the governments to invest, or is there something else that we need?
I think so that today there are some good willingness at the European level. There are different consortium who are there. But still, I believe that today we don't have a good collaboration in terms of the strong point of each country. If at the government level it will be possible to have decision to work together, this will push Europe in the right direction.
Let's talk about your company now. Let's assume that we can solve the issue with photonic integrated circuits. It is, of course, something solvable. Which applications are you targeting today?
There are 2 things here. The first thing, as I said, we go after the European market. Okay, that means we are watching the American market, because the American market is nice and big volume. The GAFA are eating a lot of pluggable optics, but as we look more at the European level, we said, okay, let's go what Europe is ready to develop by himself today. Okay, it's sure that today what Europe wants to do, they want first defense. That they want to invest a lot in defense. That they want to invest a lot in cyber security. They want to invest a lot in space. Okay. And sure, they want to invest in supercomputing also. That there is this HPC center in Barcelona who is driving all this supercomputer network. Then I think so it's really what we are targeting. And sure, we don't want to drop the mobile technology. As you know, we moved from 5G to 6G. Then we are also looking if with the new supply chain within Europe, as Europe is more oriented PIC, okay? Can we solve issue that the MOPA consortium is looking after with this new technology we have in Europe?
These are different markets. So if we talk about the space, aerospace, defense market, this is a medium volume, high gain, high margin. If we talk about, of course, the 5G to 6G, that we are talking ultra high volume for perhaps a lower margin. How do customers from this market segment react when you go to them and you tell them, hey, I have the plans and you can see already my manufacturing center, I can make transceivers today and I will be able to produce millions in 2 years?
The point is the following, that all the big system manufacturers in the world, they cover the world. Okay, that means that for their market in Asia, they will use product manufactured in Asia. For the market in the United States, they will use product manufactured in the United States. And in Europe, our volume is not at the same level than Asia or United States. And we have no issue because perhaps on their supply chain, we will be perhaps 10 or 15% of their supply chain. Then I don't see an issue to be more dedicated to for the European market.
You know what is for me exciting? As you know, Optica is global, and I spend half of my time in the US, half of the time in Europe. Of course, companies like Light Matter, like Celestial AI are corporate members, and they have managed to ring the bell of the right investors. They have managed to raise the capital they need to make big dreams come true. However, in Europe, it seems to be a different story. How is the relation between innovating companies in photonics and investment?
Yeah, I think so. It's a big challenge for us, okay? Because when you start a production line, as you will visit, you spend a few million and then, okay, it's not an issue. But as soon as you want to produce millions of pieces, okay, we don't speak about a few million, we speak about $50, $100 million investment. That means then you scale up totally a different level of investment. Today, when you look all the companies who are today in Europe developing photonics, they get funding or grants from the European Commission. European Commission today doesn't allow to grant a private company who will move in industrialization. That means our major issue here that as we lost our industrialization schemes in 30 years, the people are not anymore educated to invest inside an industrialization. And it's with the weakness we have today. That means today when we look after investor, it's very complex to find people first who understand the technology, and second, who are willing to take the risk to go in industrialization.
But we're talking about investment in infrastructure. And when it comes to investment in infrastructure, it has always to be a public-private partnership. Are we right now in a position in photonics in which you can convince governments and private investors to work together?
As I said all the time, I touch this subject. I said, as an industrial manufacturer, I'm willing to invest on production line, okay? But I'm not willing to invest in building or in clean room because I expect that if Europe wants to bring back industrialization and ensure they want to work with small, medium enterprise to start because all the innovation is coming from the small company, we need somewhere that or at the state level or at the European level, they take their responsibility by investing inside infrastructure.
Because of course, at the end of the day, what you are creating is jobs, what you are creating is opportunities for growth. And when a company is set, a manufacturing center is set, there's opportunity for many companies to grow around it. So this is a huge governmental gain. Why is it more difficult in photonics than in other industries to convince governments to partner with private investors to create these infrastructures in Europe?
I think so. They are afraid by the technology. It's moving so fast, then first, the legislation doesn't follow fast enough the new technology. And I think so they are very afraid by our geopolitical situation in nowadays. And it's mainly, I think so, what is slowing down the people to invest today in deep tech.
Ultimately, if all the investment and large investment has been made for Europe to be leading many of the photonic lines of research, if you want this to make an impact in Europe, then manufacturing has to be done in Europe. You are part of the ecosystem. You are talking to the right companies, both in the suppliers and the customers. What can we do to connect all the different dots to make sure that whenever there is this investment from public entities coming to Europe, everyone benefits, but most important, we can make production in Europe?
I think so. It's a pity to say this, but if you go to China, Huawei and ZTE have been investing a lot in small, medium enterprise who have good innovation, and the big players have been investing to help the small and medium enterprise company, where in Europe, we don't feel this, we don't feel the big system manufacturer. I don't want to name them, okay? They are willing to invest, in a good deep tech company. Then I think so this is from private side. I think that's what is a pity that this big consortium doesn't support the innovative company. It's sure on the public side is also another aspect where I think so we need absolutely to allocate, some money to support this deep tech company. If we don't do it, then it's already difficult to recover the 5 or 10 years that we have behind the American people or behind the Chinese people. Then if we don't get this money for investment, we will never make it.
But things are about to change here, and I'm extremely optimistic. Why? Because in the last years, we have seen many companies who have tried to make the product themselves and then find out that it was cheaper to be made somewhere else, and then they got it made somewhere else and they closed the manufacturing. And they made the product by working with partners globally. This is about to change. The current climate is going to force companies to save on tariffs, going to force companies to produce because the customers wanted to produce here. So I'm really optimistic on that.
Yeah, I'm also very optimistic, and I hope that the people who have the power to change it will do it.
So where do you see Estel? When I come back 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, let's say 2030. I come back here in 2030. How would be Estel looking like?
I will say we have our ambition, and sure, as you said, we are today the first manufacturer and designer of a pluggable optics in Europe. That's sure. When you're always the first one, it's the most difficult to be the first one, okay? I hope that other company will follow us, because if other company follow us, that means we have done the right choice at the right time, okay? No, where we'll be in 5 years is very difficult to say, because as you know, in our field, the technology is changing very fast, okay? And today we can see it with different technology as co-package optics, where people have a lot of idea, and you need really, I would say, if you look in 2000 or 2010, when you were developing a product, you have the time 3 or 5 years lifetime on the product, where today you develop a product, it's possible that after 1 year or 2 years, this product is obsolete, then all the complexity will be there, and also to see what are we going to do in the future? With the geopolitical situation, are we trying to develop our network on a way that will be totally different than the other continent, or are we going to copy what the other continent are making? And all this direction, I think so, will be given by people above us, and we will try to follow the requirement in the market. But our goal is really to be a high-volume manufacturing pluggable optics in the future.
At the end of the day, the security of every country depends on how well they protect their data.
Yep.
And data security is a coming market demand, and there is where you have to be very clear that everything goes through the transceivers, and the transceiver has to be safe. Is that the biggest opportunity that we have in our hands?
I like you ask me the question, because when you speak with NATO or defense and all these guys, they don't know that there is a transceivers. They don't know, they buy an equipment and they say, yeah, I buy an equipment, it's made by United States, and then it's very credible. And then we ask them the question, but do you know what is converting from electrical signal to the light? And the guy said, yeah, it's going inside an optical fiber. I said, but do you know what is making the job? I said, no, it's pluggable optics. And do you know where today the pluggable optics are manufactured? I said, yeah, it's American. I said, no, guys, 90% of the pluggable optics are manufactured in Asia. And that's clear that today the people doesn't understand that the key of the network are the pluggable optics, That means, yeah, it's clear that it's very important to get the control of what you produce and what you inject as a software inside these pluggable optics.
This is one of the biggest unknown. What would you say to the European policymakers, the ones that are perhaps thinking that they are agnostic to the physical layer? What message would you give them?
I think so. It's very simple today. When you look, and I think so, it's where they are more concerned on cyber attack. People have been working from a level 7, 6, 5, 4. And at the end, there is no choice. If you want to protect your data, you have to go to level 1, okay, the physical layer. I cannot tell you more. I'm an engineer. You also are very well known in the technology. I know that these people need to get good support from their technical team behind to explain to them where is the real danger, okay? Because today, as you said, we use optical fiber everywhere in the network, going from administration, nuclear plant, electrical plant, hills, everything, Then somewhere, if we have an issue and we cannot control what is converting the electrical signal to light, then we have control of nothing. Where are you buying your pluggable optics? Because all the network is encrypted, but the pluggable optics, when you have the physical layer, it was not encrypted.
Philippe, I drove all the way here from Spain because you promised me we would see the manufacturing line.
Yes.
Can we go and see it?
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Let's go.
Follow me.